Good afternoon. Welcome to Congregation Micah. My name's Rabbi Philip Rice, and we gather here in our sanctuary in the shadow of loss. Death has taken Dr. Sanford Krantz, and you all, his community, his family, his friends, his colleagues, students, you all mourn, and the world seems a little darker. In moments of silence, there are feelings of sadness, expressions, crying maybe of the pain of loss, of loneliness. So it's my hope that this hour, that this service will bring, if nothing else, a fitting tribute to Sanford's life, a stronger sense of his community. It's my hope that here each of you will find the presence of other people mourning, loving friends, actually. And so I pray that God be with each and every one of you. For Sanford's love, that united you with him in life, and which we Jews believe death cannot sever. For the companionship that you shared with him along your own life's path, which will continue through the tenderness of memory. And for the gifts of his mind, and his heart, and his soul, that brought each of you any sense of happiness. And now, as a precious remembrance, for these things and more, the Jewish people are taught to give thanks. In times of grief, we are taught to listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures, to the wisdom of the Torah, to those who experienced loss, our ancestors before us. And they seem to bring this ever-new message of God's nearness. They speak of a kinship with a Creator that exists in light as in darkness, and in joy as in sorrow, and certainly in life as in death. So there are familiar psalms, like Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, so I shall not want, making me to lie down in green pastures, leading me beside still waters and restoring my soul, leading me in straight paths for the sake of your name. And so even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because I know you, God, are with me. Your rod and your staff meant to comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil, so my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, when I too come to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The author of Psalm 15 asks, Adonai, mi yagur ba'ohalecha? Who is it that may abide in your house? Mi yishkan bahar kodshecha? Who gets to live on your holy mountain? And then answers, it's those who are upright, who care about justice, who speak the truth within their hearts, neither slandering others nor wronging them, who scorn the lawless and honor those who revere you, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others or take bribes, those who live in this way can never be shaken. And finally, I invite us to consider the words of Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, who speaks of a time for every experience under heaven, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. Well, in a short while, we're going to take some silence, but right now we're going to take some time to speak about Sanford. And we are going to invite his daughter forward first. She made a face, but I think she wants to get it done.
Thank you all for coming. Is that better? My father considered himself a scientist and a physician, but he was so much more. He was kind and gentle and caring. He was modest and humble, and probably would have said all of this fuss over him isn't necessary. He was a problem solver, whether that problem was the conflict in Israel or someone's health. He loved to sit around the kitchen table and try to solve the world's problems during hours of conversation. He was steady and reliable and always there for us or anyone else who needed him. He made time for others. When we came to him with a problem, he would say, "Let's think about this." He was a student of human nature. He enjoyed learning about people, their backgrounds and experiences, and trying to understand why they thought the way they did. He took care of his wife, his 4 children, his aunts and uncles, cousins, friends and colleagues, and all of the patients who came to him during his career at Vanderbilt and the VA. I have fond memories as a child before the age of cell phones or pagers of patients or other doctors calling our house in the evening or on a weekend and asking him for advice about a problem. He was always happy to talk with anyone who called. Oftentimes for his children, he relied on 2 home remedies. For aches and pains, take an aspirin. For sores and cuts, soak it. Unless it was something more serious, then we got gold standard VIP healthcare. My father was adventuresome. He liked to try a new restaurant, find a new place to vacation, and if you wondered where a trail led, he would say, "Let's see where this goes." He was our moral compass. It never occurred to him to lie, cheat, steal, or cut corners. You knew when given a choice, he would do the right thing. He was dependable. You could set your watch by him. He was a morning person by nature and rose early to drink his coffee, read the newspaper, and listen to classical music on the radio. He and I left the house sharply at 7:10 a.m. for him to drop me off at school, then go to work. He was a happy person and a positive person. He did not kvetch, complaining endlessly about others. He felt that behavior was not worth his time or energy. My sister and I shared a bedroom near the kitchen, and on weekends, when we were little, he would turn on his hi-fi and put on an album, and then we woke to the sounds of Peter, Paul, and Mary, or Pete Seeger, or Donovan's Hurdy-Gurdy Man wafting through the house. To my father, life did not have to be complicated. Family gets along with each other. You shouldn't hold grudges. Work hard, spend wisely, and if all else fails, soak it. In Judaism, we have a tradition of tikkun olam, which means taking actions to repair or mend the world. My father was not particularly religious, but he practiced tikkun olam daily, and he made the world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, I got a list here of some folks that are going to share some memories and some thoughts, and the first name on that list is, let's see, Dr. Rick Stein.
Sandy Krantz was an extraordinary person. He was, as has been told, a loving family man. He was a fine physician, a nationally and internationally renowned physician scientist who headed up NIH study sections, who wrote hundreds of scientific papers and numerous textbook chapters. He was head of the hematology program at Vanderbilt, at which I was privileged to be a member for 38 years. As a clinical investigator, Sandy's work on aplastic anemia, red cell aplasia, and erythropoietin, the hormone that regulates red cell production, was of critical importance. In fact, I've long felt that pure red cell aplasia should be known as Kranz's disease, but evidently generating new eponyms, even when they've been well-earned, seems to have gone out of fashion. Nevertheless, even after he retired from Vanderbilt, I continued to consult with him regarding my difficult patients with that uncommon disorder, and he was never too busy to offer assistance. But more important than his medical expertise was the fact that Sandy was both a gentleman and a gentleman. While he was a giant in his field as division chair, he never lorded his position over anyone. He was based at the VA hospital. Under his tutelage there, his trainees went on to important positions as head of hematology programs or even departments of medicine and other institutions. Some of them are here today at this hematology sad reunion, but that's what this is. Sandy saw his role is helping as chief at the Vanderbilt side of the street, rather. He saw his role as recruiting people, giving them, by which I mean us, the space to do their jobs, stepping in only occasionally to help them obtain support they needed, and in a world where academicians are often professional nomads, moving around from university to university, under Sandy's direction and leadership, the core clinical group that existed at Vanderbilt in the 1980s remained there for over 3 decades as the program expanded. More than that, Sandy and his wife Sandra, also known as Sandy, were great friends to my wife Adele and me. We shared the dining experiences, looking out new restaurants, and going to movies. There was even a period when we first moved to Nashville that their son Alan child sat for our 2 boys. Sandy loved gardening, and his landscaping, which he always enjoyed showing off to my wife Adele and me, was always as meticulously managed as his scientific research. In the book of Genesis, Parshat Vayeshev, Joseph is lost and wandering in the fields of Shechem while looking for his brothers. He meets a stranger who tells him they've gone on to Dothan. Joseph follows the man's advice. The story, as we know, continues. There are those who believe that that man was an angel, or more likely, an ordinary man acting as an angel. Well, Sandy was extraordinary, not ordinary. But at a very crucial point in my academic career in 1977, when I was totally lost with respect to professional direction, and that is not an understatement, Sandy recruited me to Vanderbilt. Not only did he facilitate my interviews, but on my first visit to Nashville, he had me stay in his home, which I thought was absolutely incredible. 8 years later, he made the case with the dean that I should be put in charge of the second-year course on laboratory medicine, which became a course in clinical reasoning that was the key to my remaining in Nashville. In short, Sandy was not only a scholar and a gentleman, he was the angel who guided my professional career. It was a privilege to know him. I was proud to call him my friend, and he will long be remembered.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear from Dr. Mark Corey.
I think these will probably become familiar with some of the things Rick said. I obviously had as well. And I wanted to tell you about the research side of Sandy's career here at Nashville and in Vanderbilt, and how he helped a great number of people who have now spread out throughout the world and have acquired a lot of their momentum from having been with Sandy. I basically say what his role here is as a research mentor, and then a colleague, and finally as an advocate, even after someone has left. Scientific endeavors, you usually think of people with test tubes in a laboratory and so forth, but there's something else behind it. And it's basically asking how and why, in terms of medical research, is how does a disease occur? And how can you intervene to help people who have it? And this leads to new medications or therapies, and Sandy was involved in a lot of that development, especially in hematology, as we have heard. He developed a training program here at Vanderbilt, and it's that program which has generated a lot of people who now are training others elsewhere. I didn't realize how good this program was until later when I was on one of the committees at the NIH that reviewed grants, and after 4 or 5 years on that committee, I realized that, you know, we had the best one right here, and it was just amazing to me. And what it was is Sandy had recruited others from other disciplines, pediatrics, pathology, and so forth, and put together basically an intellectual unit. And I found out about this because I had sent a letter to Vanderbilt wanting to get, I was in pathology, wanted to go into hematology, but I had to go through internal medicine. I didn't come here, but I told them what I thought, what I was thinking. I got an unsolicited letter. They had contacted Sandy, even though I didn't come here. He sent a letter 2.5 pages long, single-spaced, and filled with what was going on, who was who, what your research potential was, and invited me to come for an interview, which I did. And like almost everyone at that time, you had never seen Sandy, but he had this light blue coat, sports jacket. And he would always say, you can identify me by the blue sports jacket. And as I've talked to others, they too had that experience. I must say I had a great interview, met many people, and then I got a follow-up letter saying, please consider us seriously, and we need people like you, is how he said it. Well, needless to say, I came, and it was very life-changing for me as well. Sandy was very enthusiastic and yet intellectual. He knew that you talked about things, then you let people do what they thought about. And he tolerated me because I guess I wandered here or there, and he would advise me, but let me go on my own. And I think he did this with most people. And eventually everybody got their own little niche. They went on, and then they went on and became independent. I can remember when he told Maurice Bondurant and me that it was time that he'd not be on our papers and that he let us go on our own. He really was good at knowing when it was time to let someone go, and then he would promote people. That would be at Vanderbilt or even elsewhere after they left. And in lieu of me going on further, I thought I would read two actually email letters that I received from two other people. One in Japan, this is Kenichi Sawada, and another who's actually back in China now visiting with his mother. This is Zhou Zhao. Both of them came through at different times, and this is what they wrote to me, and they gave me permission to read it to you. This is from Kenichi Sawada and his wife Michicho. After receiving the news of Professor Krantz' passing, I am fondly and nostalgically reminded of the research life I spent with him in the United States, accompanied by sadness. In 1986, 10 years after graduating from medical school, I came to the United States and spent 3 years as a research fellow under Professor Krantz. I heard that I was his first Japanese fellow. Those 3 years in which we worked together with excitement to successfully complete each project one by one were truly enjoyable. Under Professor Krantz's guidance, I learned what was most important in research. Professor Krantz was not only a top-notch leader, but also a kind person. He always cared about ensuring that both my wife, Michicho, and I were doing well during our life in the United States. He also introduced me to many researchers thinking about my future. When I returned to Japan, Professor Krantz said, "You may take 1/3 of the laboratory, including reagents," which allowed me to start my research in just 3 weeks after returning to Japan in 1989 and making a smooth start. But obviously, the NIH never heard about that. I believe that my life would have been different had I not had the research experience under Professor Krantz. In 2013, I held the annual meeting of the Japanese Society of Hematology as its president in Sapporo, and I am grateful to have invited Professor Krantz to give a special lecture. We are deeply saddened by Professor Krantz's passing, and my wife and I mourn his loss. We sincerely thank him for deeply influencing our lives Since we came to the United States, we offer our deepest condolences to his wife and family on their loss. Now, this is from Joe Zhao, who's now a professor at the University of Oklahoma and heads a large research unit there. I am deeply saddened to hear about the passing of Sandy. My heart goes out to his family and friends during this difficult time. Sandy was not only a colleague, but also a mentor to me. I still vividly remember how he tirelessly edited my grant applications until the very last minute. He always went above and beyond to support junior faculty members like myself. Sandy's name has been listed in the acknowledgments of my slides presentations as a token of my gratitude and respect for him. Whenever I give seminars at academic institutions, I always use Sandy as an example of an excellent division chair. His leadership, guidance, and support for junior faculty were unparalleled, and that's Joe Zhao. So I think that that's just a sampling of what I received on notifying folks, and I think it's a universally felt feeling of gratitude to Sandy. On behalf of all those who worked with him in research, I wish to express our gratitude for his guidance in both our scientific and our intellectual development. And we are most appreciative that have had him as a mentor, a colleague, and as an advocate.
Thank you. Dr. Stephen Brandt?
As we've heard, I would actually like to speak to Sandy's generosity. I was recruited by Sandy in 1990 from the NIH. I had no thought at all that I would end up at Vanderbilt, but he was so convincing, and he had created such a strong program in red cell biology that the offer was kind of irresistible. After I came, Sandy showed an amazing generosity to me. He was supportive of me in my setting up my laboratory and my research, and also personally. In contrast to many other chiefs, he didn't put any pressure on me. There were no requirements that I do a certain amount of clinical work while I was getting my research lab going. I was not pressured to publish a certain number of papers or get a certain number of grants. And since I had started my research program over from scratch, that was greatly appreciated. But he was also incredibly generous personally. He was very interested in me personally. When Becky and I went to China to adopt our daughter, Hannah, he was as delighted as any grandparent or close friend could be. And I will always be grateful for the way he supported me and the way he ran the division. So I would like to read a poem by one of the preeminent poets of the 20th century, John Hollander, who was the Sterling Professor of English at Yale. This poem actually, as some people know, hung on the wall in my office, my Vanderbilt office for many years. And John Hollander's family sponsored my grandparents and my father when they left Germany. This is from a book of poetry that is called The Power of 13. And every poem in this book has 13 lines in each stanza and 13 syllables in each line. This poem is entitled 169, which is, of course, 13 squared. Let me say first that although in the demanding light of morning, the discrepancies rattling our discourse speak of a noisier afternoon, what can be heard is the sound of things evening up between our two conditions, as if we were light and sound disputing claims for primacy at the morning of the world, till the odd evening hour, neither yours nor mine, but ours, when our hands reach out to touch like object and image moving toward the mirror's surface, each through the magic space that the other's world must needs transform in order to comprehend. When our voices have surrounded one another, each like some penumbra of resonance, so that you have the last word, now I give it to you.
Thank you. Finally, Dr. John Greer.
Can you imagine what their friends and their colleagues thought when the Krantzes said they were moving to Nashville to start a division, run a division of hematology and raise a family? In 1970, Nashville was not the it city of today. Sandy quickly rose in the heights of red blood cells. He became everything about red blood cells. And I do have it in here somewhere. He put Vanderbilt on an international map in hematology. And he's one of the few people in academic medicine who excelled in the three jobs that we all wanted to do. He was a researcher, a teacher, and a clinician. Like a red blood cell delivering oxygen, Sandy Krantz delivered opportunity. He paved the way for scientists like Mark Corey and Maurice Bondurant and Steve Brandt to have independent careers of their own. Along with Stan Graber, he taught us the importance of looking at slides underneath the microscope of blood and bone marrow. And he recruited Rick Stein to join John Flexner in the clinical arm of hematology at Vanderbilt. And together, Sandy had a team of people to train the next generation of hematologists, including Ann Neff, Bob Means, Stacy Goodman. And he gave me my one and only job. I was surrounded by people who I trusted and could turn to for advice. This included Steve Wolf, who we worked with in transplantation and leukemia. Billy Bean in the office enhanced our lives every day. Mary Jane Rich typed all generated the grants for the incredible research that was done. I want to thank Mrs. Krantz and their children for sharing Sandy with us. I cannot thank you enough for all he did for me. I treasure his kindness and his mentorship. He really did give me the job of a lifetime. We were able to take care of patients at a time when there was a lot of progress in both therapy and outcome. We're all grateful that Sandy was a part of our lives. And as his daughter said, Sanford B. Krantz made the world a better place.
Thank you. I got a couple pictures. You guys want to see some pictures? They sent these in, so I thought that makes it a little more personal. Because in Judaism, when someone we love dies and we speak of them, because we're supposed to, we say Zikrona Livracha, that their memory should live on as a blessing. And so how does that work? How do memories bless us? I think they bless us when we have them, and they bless us when we share them, right? I think, Sandy, you were married 64 years together? 64 years? So when Sandy and his daughter Sarah sat in my office for a little while to share some memories, they told me that he was actually the first in his family to go to college, right? That they described him to me as humble and yet brilliant and honest and not gregarious. There were no dad jokes, you said. That wasn't really his thing. He wasn't really into small talk. It kind of bored him. There was that reliable part, dependable, kind of one of the first guys you go to for help in so many situations. Someone who loved the routine, but also the adventure. You always can tell a pretty bright guy because there was always a book he was reading, too. And he had the opportunity to travel all over the world. Not everybody does. Cruises and conferences and really continents. And I think his interest in people clearly as a physician meant that he cared for people, whether it was veterans or his parents or his wife or his children, extended family. And they were sure to mention to me, you must have known this, that he was some sort of big Chicago Cubs fan, that he loved the Bears. So there's this very old, beautiful story. Really, it's a Jewish idea that when you teach, you're supposed to teach and speak b'shem amro. It means in the name of the person that you learn that idea from. You should quote them. You should give them credit. And all throughout rabbinic literature, there's this like meticulous, like onerous listing of attributions. This was taught to me by Rabbi so-and-so. And this whole notion of speaking b'shem amro is so essential, so central, that the Talmud says that one who speaks in the name of the person who originally taught the idea brings redemption to the world. And I thought of this actually when we were sitting together for a little bit, and afterwards I was like, really, redemption to the world, right? I understand why it's important to give credit when you share other people's ideas, but it sounds like the ancient rabbis to me are kind of overstating the point. They say that speaking in the name of another person actually brings redemption to the world, this idea of tikkun olam, of which they speak, of making the world a better place. And so then I read this story. There was this young rabbi teaching a lesson, something he learned from his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan. But whether he was absent-minded or arrogant, he neglected to teach it in Rabbi Yochanan's name. And Rabbi Yochanan heard about this, and he was angry. He was outraged, actually. And he stewed in his anger for a little while, too long probably, and his friends began to worry about him, and they went to placate him by talking about the danger of holding grudges. One after the next, they failed to sort of appease him. And finally, one colleague went before Rabbi Yochanan and reassured him, even when your student doesn't say your name, everyone knows everything he's saying is based on what he learned from you. You're his prize student. And when Rabbi Yochanan heard this, he felt a little better. And then when I read that story, I wondered, was Rabbi Yochanan really that angry? And I realized that he fully believed that when you speak in a person's name, their spirit stays alive even after their death. And it's as if Rabbi Yochanan himself was speaking then like he's speaking right now. And it's centuries after he lived and still teaching us from the grave. And Rabbi Yochanan wasn't motivated by hubris or pettiness. He wasn't interested in royalties or syndication checks. he understood fundamentally that this teaching, that speaking and acting in someone's name is the way we keep them alive in this world after they die. And it's how we Jews, anybody really, achieves a sort of eternal life. So I'm going to say here, teach the world what Dr. Sanford Krantz taught you, because that honors him, and it helps you remember him, and will teach other people who he was. Give him credit by saying his name, because I think when you do, at least I believe, that he will feel the echoes of our words. Essentially, we Jews believe that we do our best homage to our loved ones when we take their best qualities, his caring, considerate nature, his kindness, his generosity, qualities you know about him far better than I, and we make them a very part of ourselves, because then he will continue to bless you. We have spoken of him, and we're going to continue to speak, to teach Be'ashem Amro in his name. But as Kohelet, Ecclesiastes reminds us, there are moments that require speaking, and there are moments that require a little silence. So we're going to take just a little bit of silence now. Let our silence reach out to Sanford's family, to his wife, his children, and his grandchildren. Let their tears fall on us. Let their anger break against us. Let our love and our deeds speak for Sanford. In his own sorrow, the prophet Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach. God, you have given. God, you have taken away. Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach. Blessed be the name of that God now and forever. As an ancient people, the Jewish people are well acquainted with grief, with the valley of shadows. Death, sorrow, these things are not strangers to us. And still the centuries have taught us that a good name can endure beyond the grave, and that there can be strength in faith. And so like Job, on our behalf, I say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You have given a loved one to this world who will not be forgotten. And for all that was good and enduring in Sanford's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, now you have taken away. So it is we pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we too can acknowledge your sovereignty and love, and say, Yehi Shem Adonai mevarach, blessed be the name of that God now and forever. May all of you who are mourning his loss find some comfort in the hope that though the dust returns to the earth as it was, we believe the spirit returns to God who gave it. And so death is not the end. And those we love pass through the gateway of the grave to what we believe to be a piece of life eternal. We also know that we must tread the same path, even though we may not know the hour in which that might come. And so, at this time, I'm going to invite you all to please rise. And I'm going to recite a prayer called El Malei Rachamim, which will ask that his soul be protected, followed by Kaddish Yatom, mourner's Kaddish. And goes like this. El Malei Rachamim shochen baramim hametzei nechuna tachat kanfei hashechina im kiroshim takarim kazor harakia mazhirim et nishmato. Shehalach la'alamo ba'al harachamim nistarechu beseter kanafav la'olamim v'yitzror bitzor chachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nakalato v'yanuach v'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, we ask that you grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Dr. Sanford Krantz, who has entered eternity. God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence in the shadow of your wings. and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. As God is his inheritance, may he rest in peace, and together we can say, Amen. And finally, words that have lasted centuries. Git gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabba, ve'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon v'yomachon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, v'agala v'izman kari v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei rabba v'arak le'alam al me'al maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudesha prichu, ve'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, Tamiran be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlomo rabba min shemaya v'chaim, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. We ask that God grant peace to all of you who are mourning, comfort to all people who may feel bereaved among us, and we say one final time together, amen. So that concludes the formal service, but there is an informal gathering, what we call Shiva, and those who would like to join the family at the address of 300 Esteberry Court. That's going to take place just following this service. So we want to thank you all very much for coming, and may his memory continue to live on and bless each and every one of you.